Welcome, everybody. My name's Will Penny. I'm in Ohio. I've been a realtor since 1988, and I've sold about 3,000 houses, have my own brokerage for 21 years, have a small team now of 3. We sell 150 to 200 homes a year. On this call, we also have John Gualtieri, who's been my business coach since 2008. John had a big RE/MAX team in Philadelphia. He's been a coach for over 15, approaching 20 years now. He only coaches top team leaders for the most part. Speaking of which, we've got Bobby Johnson. John, by the way, backing up, John's in Northeast Florida now. He has a coaching business. And then Bobby Johnson, Bobby's in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, which is a luxury market in the Panhandle. They have an office there. Bobby's been in the business since 1999, I believe, right, Bobby? And he sells about $80 million worth of real estate a year with one person, mainly luxury property. So he certainly has a lot to teach here. So what we're going to get into today, we talk about lead acquisition a lot, but the most important thing is lead conversion, because if you're spending a lot of your time on lead acquisition, and it's funny, I talk to team leaders all the time and they're dialing up their lead acquisition, but then they spend very little time on lead conversion. And you can get a lot more leads just by converting more of the ones that you have. So that typically boils down to asking questions, listening, and following a plan. So today we're going to get into internet buyer lead conversion. We've got a couple of acronyms we're going to talk about that's going to help you navigate that phone call. It's usually going to be a phone call. You want to get people on a phone call. You can't do a lot of this over text or an email. If you figure out a way to do it successfully, please let me know. And then we're going to also talk about how to handle the listing presentation. I think a lot of you really want to get better at listing houses, because that's the real devil right now, is to get listings. Number of transactions year over year across the country is down about 30%. That means 30% fewer homes are hitting the market. And that rings true in my market, which is in Northeast Ohio. I see we've got a couple of agents here in Northeast Ohio as well. So we're going to talk about the best way to hit a home run and get a listing signed so you don't talk yourself out of a listing. So without further ado, we're going to get into 2 acronyms, and then I'm going to hand it over to John because he's really good with this. The first one, when you get a buyer on the call, you don't want to just start yammering at them. The first acronym, I got this from a team leader. He's got 10 agents on his team, sells about 50 million or so homes in Northeast Ohio. And he's got a very short acronym. It's called Appointment, Location, Motivation. And we're going to get into the details of that. And then there's an acronym that's been floating around for decades. It's called LPMAMA, LPMAMA. And that is location, price, motivation, agent, money, and appointment. So you want to hit those things. Pretty much falls into the ALM. It's whatever you're comfortable with. But I'm going to hand this over to John now, because John coaches agents on this stuff all day long. So John, take it away, and then we'll talk about this as we go through it.
If you're a hardworking real estate agent and you're struggling to get ahead of it and not pay a referral fee or pay for monthly leads, and you just want to get a referral-based business so that you can have a long career, I've got a solution for you. My name's Will Penny. I've been a realtor since 1988. 2 years ago, I started a private Facebook group. It's been the best thing I've ever done. We now stay top of mind with our sphere 4 to 5 days a week, and we get more referrals than we ever did before. If you'd like to mimic my success, all you've got to do is go to socialorchard.com, socialorchard.com. For as little as $89 a month, you can have a private Facebook group, all the content, so all you have to do is stay in touch with your people. It's the best thing I've done in my whole career.
Yeah, so one of the things that I will share with you all is that, in my experience, the most important thing we can do is make an emotional connection with people, because that creates trust. And if we have trust, moving forward, it's a downhill run from there. Sorry, guys, my phone is ringing. I'm like the Pope. Everybody wants an audience. No, I'm joking. McNally didn't even laugh at that. But at the end of the day, the other piece of this, and Will mentioned it, is assessing motivation. And before the call, Bobby and Will and I were talking about the idea that, hey, of all the variables that determine whether or not we're going to see a paycheck, motivation is number one. I mean, Bobby, do you agree with that? You're muted. Bottom left of your screen.
Sorry, Will told me to mute myself. So yes, I would agree, Coach, 100%.
So what Will, if with your buy-in and Bobby with your buy-in, I would like to talk about what I call threshold questions that will determine motivation. And the first one sounds like this. Will, if you could share with me the perfect date for you to move into a new home, what would that date be? Right? It's a beautiful question that leads into motivation. They're going to say, well, July 31st. Well, it's not like, okay, July 31st, check, and you go on to another subject. You have to have an in-depth conversation. Quick story, I won't bore you, but I talked to a team agent about a month ago, and she had some buyers go sideways on her. And after questioning her about their level of motivation, she had no idea, which meant she spent 10 seconds on the subject. You need to spend 5 minutes on the subject. So first question is, hey, Will, could you share with me the perfect date for you to move into a new home? Well, it's July 31st. Well, Will, tell me more about that. Why is that an important date for you? Well, because da, 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 da. Well, Will, I'm just curious, if you could find the perfect home tomorrow, let's just pretend, I'm guessing that July 31st is still the date. You see, you dig, right? You dig around this area of motivation. And what I will always tell clients is, guys, fools run where an angel fears to follow. At the end of the day, if you don't know what's behind the curtain, if you don't know what somebody's thinking, and you rush in there, you're going to get into trouble. You're going to get killed probably. So ask questions, listen actively, and find out what's behind the curtain. If I said to somebody, hey, I'm just curious if you found the perfect house tomorrow, I'm guessing that July 31st is still the date. Well, yeah, it is. So when you say, well, it's still the date, is that the date that you would move in, have to move in, even if the seller wanted to settle the next day, let's pretend. You just keep digging on motivation, because if you don't, you can get killed. Somebody could have the money, right? Somebody could have a mortgage commitment, and on it goes. If they don't have motivation, you're done. Now, with the internet leads, Will, one of the questions that I have found is very effective, and I would ask you and Bobby to weigh in on this, whether it's an outbound call or an inbound call, if they are looking at a specific property, the first question that I would always ask, and for me, it was on a sign or an ad call. I mean, I know I'm old, but it was like, hey, Will, listen, would you mind sharing with me before we get started? Our sellers love when we give them feedback on their home. Could you tell me what caught your eye about this house? Why did you call about this specific home? It's a great question to ask a prospective buyer leading in. Or, Will, I see you're searching in such and such a neighborhood. Could you just share with me what about that neighborhood is really, really important to you? You guys get the idea. So look, I don't want to hog the microphone. Will, Bobby, you probably want to weigh in as you do internet leads.
So it's interesting to hear you guys talk about this, because our market here is a little different. We don't have like when most of these people don't need a second home. So their date is always there. They start off really just searching, it seems. And then, we have to try to develop this relationship with them, and, almost begin to sell them a bit of a lifestyle of why it's, why this is a great place to live. And, we're just now, as crazy as this is, as long as I've been doing this, we're just now entering more of a, where we are having more primary buyers. But the way we qualify internet leads is literally, I tend to again, always asking questions. But it's really, I always start with, have you been here before? For me, that's a huge qualifier, because if they've never been here, they're way out in the cycle. I try to find
it's like what's behind the curtain, right?
Right, right. So, and if you haven't been here, then we want to get them set up in systems to where they're getting drips and whatnot, but we're trying to find out when they're going to be in town. What weekend, and it's typically another issue that we deal with in this type of market is, if they're not going to be here a Saturday, typically you can't get into 85% of these homes. They're rented. So Saturday is the only day you can get in to see the home. So our cycle is entirely different, but we do, we're learning as from you guys all the time about how to deal with these primary buyers, because this is all really kind of new to our world.
Well, what I would say, Bobby and Will, is that the principles are steadfast. The strategy is always negotiable depending on your market. Principle, find out what's behind the flipping curtain. Find out motivation, principle, how you get there, no matter what market you're in, is a matter of strategy. Don't you agree, Will?
Yeah, I found, obviously in our market in Northeast Ohio, it's mainly either first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, move-down buyers, relocation buyers. So when you get an internet lead, let's just say it's a Realtor.com lead where they actually want to talk to a human. Now, it's an entirely different conversation when you're talking about Google pay-per-click ads or Facebook ads, because those people are usually inquiring about an offer, a list of homes for sale, some kind of a checklist. So they're not really interested in having a conversation yet. So you have to talk to them entirely differently, right? It's about building a rapport, building that emotional connection. But on a Realtor.com lead or a Zillow lead, typically what's going to be, or even a sign call, all they care about, impulsively or not, is to make an appointment to see that house or to eliminate it. One of those two things. And the analogy I use, if you walk into a clothing store and you've got a wedding at 4 o'clock this afternoon and you need to buy a tie or you need to buy a shirt, you might go in there and you've got 20 minutes and you've got to find a red tie or blue tie or whatever. If someone comes up to you and says, "How may I help you?" no matter how motivated you are, your psychological protection is to say, "I'm just looking," right? Even though you have to buy, you've got 20 minutes to buy a tie or a shirt, you got a wedding that you've got to be at in 2 hours. So it's very important to consider that when an internet lead, especially one on Realtor.com or a sign call, internet, Realtor.com or Zillow, those are people that are calling about a specific property. And the first thing that I have found that works is to address the appointment. ALM, write this down. We're going to have this recording that we're going to send out later. Apple, Larry, Mary. So A is the appointment. So the first thing I typically do is to talk about the appointment. Since they're calling about a house, they clicked contact agent or schedule appointment or whatever. They're going to hear, for the older people here, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher, the wah, wah, wah in the background, right? If you don't address the appointment, which is what their number one focus is, then what's going to happen is everything else you're talking about, they're not going to hear. I have found the easiest thing to do so that they lower their nerves is say, "Okay, you're calling about the house at 123 Oak Street. When did you want to see it?" And then they'll tell you and say, "Okay, so 10 o'clock tomorrow. I can't confirm that right now. I need to get a hold of the listing agent or the owner, and then I'm going to make a second phone call, follow up with you and tell you, and confirm the showing." Even if it's got a pending offer on it. And remember this, just get that appointment locked down tentatively. Now that's done. Now they're going to listen to you, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Then I go back to what John was talking about. You need to start talking about their motivation. But the first thing I do is I say, "Okay, what about this house caught your eye? Are you looking in that specific town? Are you open to other towns? That's a Cape Cod or a split level or whatever. Are you open to other options? What is it that you're truly looking for?" Because now that you've got the appointment tentatively nailed down, they've got what they wanted accomplished, but they can't hang up on you because you've got to call them back to confirm the appointment. And I've talked to a couple of big team leaders lately, and they follow that same process with their team agents. So then you start talking about the location, what caught their eye. what's their current situation, and just start asking questions about that. And then we go straight into motivation. I got the line that John used, because that's the one I've been using for a long time. If you could pick a perfect date in the future where you'd be all moved in and have this thing behind you, when would that be? Just so I have an idea of what your timeline looks like. And they'll pick it. And then I'll say, okay, so the end of November, that's cool. So what is it about November that, what made you pick November and not December? Or you don't want to pick a date sooner, because then it sounds like you're trying to speed them along. Pick a date farther down the road, because then they'll answer your question. Then we get that, so we talk about motivation. The next thing is I say, hey, is that house is 289,000 or whatever. Is that in the price range that you're comfortable in? Or do you have a range around that? Can you go higher, or would you prefer to go lower? And then get that out of them. The way I find out, I used to ask if they were working with an agent differently. I would say, hey, have you been working with any other agents? Just like when you go into that closing store and they say, I'm just looking, I have found that the easiest way to find out if they're working with another agent isn't to say, have you been working with another agent? Just ask them, hey, have you looked at any other homes lately with other real estate agents? Because then it's kind of around the back door way of asking them, are you working with an agent? And they'll say, yeah, we looked at a couple the other day, and say, okay. And I would, again, you want to focus on an appointment, so I would blow that off for now. Because if you get too far in the weeds about the other agent, unless they start saying, yeah, we've been working with another agent, but she wasn't available, so I called you. Well, then you're going to need to start asking some questions. Then we get into the money. Hey, if you find a house, are you paying cash for it? Or are you getting a mortgage? Don't assume. Don't say, have you been pre-approved? That's what everyone asks. Until you run into a cash buyer and they smack you down. Because if you run into a cash buyer and you say, have you been pre-approved? They're going to feel like you're patronizing them. Do you agree, John?
I do. And if I just may interject, there's three things that'll kill you. First one, you said, are you working with another agent? Number two is, have you been pre-approved? And number three is, do you have a house to sell? If you don't know how to ask those questions through the back door, as Will was saying, you're dead. I always, for the mortgage piece, and Will, what Will said is perfectly fine, but I always just say, Will, I'm just curious, when you met with your mortgage loan officer, what did he or she tell you? Right? I found that's a good way to ask that question. When it came to working with another agent, my back door was, well, Will, I'm just curious, have you physically seen any homes? Have you gone out and looked at any homes? And they're going to say yes or no. If they say no, well, I'm pretty sure they're not working with another agent. If they say yes, my next move was, well, Will, did you see, were any of those homes that you really liked? I didn't care if they said yes or no. If they said yes, I would say, well, when you didn't buy it, what did the agent tell you, right? Or if they said no, I would say, well, when you weren't finding any homes that suited you, what did the other agent tell you? So Will's absolutely right. Backdoor. And listen, while I'm at it, really quick, do you have a home to sell? Bad move.
No,
right?
don't do that.
It's really a bad move. And what I would ask is, well, Bobby,
what's your current situation?
Well, either that or Bobby, I'm just curious, is this your first home? Is this the first home you're going to buy? If they say no, right, they're not a first-time buyer. I got a pretty good idea of their situation. If they say yes, we're done. But man, you ask direct questions like that, you're begging for trouble.
Especially on the first call.
No.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, no, I was just kind of adding into how I typically approach. Again, we're such different markets, and I know, like Coach says, it's still all the same. A lot of our people that come down here, they're buying the second homes. They don't need these homes. They're getting inundated by a lot of agents hitting them up on social media through all their marketing, whatever. So what I always try to do is come across in my early connection with them that I'm local, been doing this a long time, and then I go through these questions of qualifying while I'm qualifying them to me. So I feel like they're coming back to me as well, as they're online, they're seeing tons and tons of real estate agents, and now they've stumbled into me as the longtime local. And I feel like that works better for me when I get the subject off of the properties. I try to get that out of the air, and I get it back directed into my relationship with them. And then while I'm learning about them and I'm teaching them about me a little bit, I'm learning, and I'm just kind of going through the process of these questions. I'm finding out, they'll tell me if they've got a home to sell. They'll tell me how qualified they are or not. I've just always had kind of more of a backdoor approach, I suppose, to it in a secondary market. I've got to qualify myself as well.
Well, I think
Right.
that we're saying the same thing, just different strategy, right? We're finding out what's behind the curtain, the principles are immutable. Strategy, we negotiate all day long.
That's right.
Right, because if even in a secondary market like yours, you want to get to behind, what's making them want a second home, and you can get, because it's an emotional purchase, it's not a necessary one. It's the same questions that they ask people in a Ferrari dealership or a BMW dealership. Nobody needs the guy at the BMW dealership who used to sell houses. His name's Bob Strecker. He had a brokerage for a long time. He goes, nobody needs a BMW. So you ask different questions than you would, if it were a more domestic brand in the car business. And in your business, when you're dealing with secondary homes where they're buying a weekend home or they're looking for an Airbnb, so you have to decide, are they looking for income? Or are they looking to spend the time down here themselves? It all comes down to questions. But in our area, I usually ask them back to when I handed it over to John. If you ask them about right out of the gate, and so many agents do this, and they're killing their chances of getting that buyer to work with them. Just say, have you been pre-approved? It's like, we like talking about multiple offer situations lately. I mean, who came up with that? Multiple offer situations. And when you ask someone, have you been pre-approved? It can come off really the wrong way. Like you're trying to qualify them so that they meet your cut. Nobody likes that. When you're dealing with a salesperson, which is what they look at us as, and we say, by the way, have you been pre-approved? All they're looking at as, he's asking me if I'm worthy of him. And it puts them on their heels, I have found. So if you say, hey, if you find a house, are you paying cash or getting a mortgage? Then it's just more of a general question. If they say getting a mortgage, say, well, when you met with your mortgage guy, let me open this up. When you met with your mortgage guy, what'd you guys talk about? Or what did they say, or whatever? And you just ask them some general questions about that. But I wouldn't get too deep on the phone call, because the goal ultimately is to get an appointment at your office or an appointment at the house, preferably at the office. So that's pretty much the path on a buyer inquiry. You either want to, at some point, you're going to talk about the appointment. I've just decided put it up front, because then you can put it on the back burner. Next, you want to talk about that particular house and what caught your eye and what they like about it, what they didn't like about it, and the price range. Is that comfortable? And then you want to talk about their motivation. And then finally, ask them if they've been looking at homes with another agent, just so you can, or if this is their first, have they looked at any other homes recently? Once you've done that, then you say, okay, great. I'll text you my contact information. Let me check on tomorrow's appointment. Then I'll give you a call back. John, do you have anything you want to add before I keep yammering?
No, this is the third time I've said it. I've gotten into so much trouble back. Am I muted?
No, but you got all fuzzy for a second. You'll have to start.
Okay, I'm not close enough to my new microphone.
You're giant Boston Globetrotter.
Yeah, what's this called? The blue ball or something, right? So anyway, what I was saying is, like, look, I've said this the third time, because spaced repetition is how we learn. I've gotten killed so many times in the past by not knowing what's behind the curtain. And I want to tell a quick story about commission, which may be a good segue into listing. I got a call from another agent in another marketplace. His aunt and uncle's listing had expired in my marketplace, and he asked if he could come out on the listing appointment for a referral fee. I said, sure. Well, I get there, and this kid is taking over my listing presentation. I'm thinking, like, why the hell am I here? Just get the paperwork signed and drop it off at my office. The kid's uncle turns to me and says, John, what is your commission? his genius nephew said, well, bada bing, bada boom, E-I-E-I-O, we'll come back to that later. And I'm sitting there like, this is amateur hour. So I turned to his uncle and I politely excused myself. I said, Tim, excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt your listing presentation. No, I didn't say that. I said, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. And I turned to his uncle and I said, Lou, I'm just curious. You asked about the commission a couple minutes ago. Why did you ask about the commission at this point in the meeting? I'm not making this up. He said, John, I was hoping if I paid you more, I could get the house sold quicker. And
You made that up. I don't believe that for a second.
it's absolutely a true story. Absolutely a true story.
That's your one unicorn listing.
Well, it's a poignant example, though, of knowing what's behind the curtain, right? You know, like and guys, this is something in our listings, you know, one of the deadly mistakes that we make is we're not abundantly prepared for the commission objection. We just hope it doesn't.
I'll add a quick story to that, Coach. We're working with a buyer. We actually have a call with him today, and Stacy was driving him around, and I jumped in. I'm going with them. Stacy's my partner, and Missy is my buyer's agent. They're on the call right now. But I told Stacy after it all, I said, I don't know. I'm not really feeling this guy's ready, and that's, you know, one of our issues down here is it's a very long. It can be a very long cycle to get to the end of to get to the actual sale. And this is a $10 million buyer, 10 million and below. He would probably go higher. So it's somebody, you know, you should be asking a lot of questions and paying attention to. And I failed to kind of dial that part in. Well, Stacy didn't, because we're both working him at different parts throughout the showings. It's a big houses, you're going through them, and it takes two people sometimes to do these type of properties. And he has to purchase by 2024. He has to, for tax purposes. And I missed that, you know. I didn't look behind the curtain. So, unfortunately, my partner did. So we're definitely has our attention for sure.
Well, she was smart enough to ask that, and you were smart enough to bring her onto the team. So
There you go.
All right, so let's, if anybody has any questions, before we move into the listing appointment, I'll open it up. Questions about the buyer call. Anybody, based on what we said, anybody got anything they want to ask? All right, cool. Everyone's,
I'll throw one out there. Will.
all right, hi Armand.
Yeah, you guys are talking about, you guys have got a bunch of great dialogues to use to help uncover what's going on with your buyers. And another one that I frequently use with the buyers in order to find out if they're already, if they have an agent in their back pocket, somebody that they'd rather work with rather than me. I tend to ask, oh, by the way, who is your regular agent in town? Just ask them directly, who, not do you have an agent? That's a yes or no question. But I do sort of do the assumptive close. Who is your regular agent in town? You know, okay,
that's really good.
About seeing this house, but I need to know who is your regular agent.
You know, Will's going to steal that and take credit for it.
I'm going to use it immediately.
That's all right. Go for it.
He's been known to do that with me. He steals my stuff.
Well, what you get paid for.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
All right, so nobody's got any questions. So what we're going to do next, we're going to move into the listing appointment. In the old days, like 2015, 16, 17, things started getting tight around 2019 probably. We started seeing multiple offers in our marketplace in probably 2018 to 19. And then it got really out of hand in 2021 and last year. Now it's right back at it, just different, you know, it just feels a lot different. But obviously, if you get a listing appointment, you don't want to screw it up. And I'm a talker. My wife always says I have 2 mouths and 1 ear, right? Well, so I just try to work around that. There's an old acronym. It's called listen to list, talk and walk, right? So the more you talk, the more you're going to end up walking out the door without a listing. So the general feeling here is you're pulling up to this house. I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to shut the heck up, because you want to build a rapport, a bond with those people, and you just want to ask them questions. And here's one thing that I'm going to say right out of the gate. You have to be enthusiastic about the house. I had a listing last year. I completely changed the whole way I handle listing appointments after 35 years, and I'm pretty good at it. I got to the end of the listing appointment. They said they'd let me know. The husband texted me 2 days later and said, the lovely text, "We're going in a different direction." It's like, oh no. Well, I called him up and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he said, "My wife felt like you weren't very excited or enthusiastic about our house." So you can do everything right and ask all the right questions, but if you don't act enthusiastic about the house, then hang on one second. What's going to happen is you could lose it that way. So, John, why don't you talk about, because you're the best at it as far as I'm concerned, why don't you talk about what a listing appointment should look like for most of us?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to answer that question is talk about what it doesn't look like, because
There you go.
because it's a big problem. And let me just share with you in sort of kind of order mistakes that we make in this wheelhouse. The first one is that we are overly zealous when we get an appointment, and we walk in there not knowing what's behind the curtain. And the dialogue I used to, and it was just like Will was saying with the buyers, you give them what they want, which is an appointment, and then you ask questions. So I would get an appointment. I would say, "Armand, before I hang up, can I ask you a few questions so that I'm better prepared for our meeting?" Right? I've had clients, like seasoned agents, go on a listing appointment and the people would say, "Hey, we just want to let you know we're not selling. We just want to know what the price is for our
And you didn't even
house."
ask.
Right. So the question is, "Hey, Will, I'll see you out there tomorrow night, but before I hang up, can I just ask you
Real
a couple
quick,
of questions?"
John. So real quick, just so everyone understands, when someone calls and says, "Hey, Marshall, I would like to list my house. You want to come out and see it?" So these are the questions you ask on that phone call before you go out and meet them. You don't want to just say, "Great, I'll be out tomorrow," without asking these questions.
Exactly. So, there's a few things that we want to know. The first and most important one is, will all decision makers be present? Because if you go out there, I just had a client, this guy's a monster, and he goes out, I am not making this up, 2 to 3 listing appointments a day. He went out on a listing appointment about 3 weeks ago because the wife had called in, and he said, "Well, is your husband going to be there?" And she said, "No, this is all my job." So he gets there and she said, "I have to talk to my husband." And like Will said, he then gets the text saying, "Hey, my husband felt a lot more comfortable with another agent," right? So we want to know if all decision makers are going to be there, because what's behind the curtain. You want to know, if humanly possible, what they believe their home is worth. I want to know that before I go out there. I would say all of how you ask the questions. Will, I'm just curious, if you had to guess, what about do you think your house is worth, right? So I want to know if all decision makers are there. I want to know what they believe their house is worth. I want to know that perfect date. Look, I'm not going to inundate them with questions at that initial call, but I want to know some fundamental info. And I don't want to take up time. I asked about a half a dozen questions. The second mistake that we make, and I believe this is a fatal error, is that we get there and say, hi, how are you? It's so nice. Thank you for having me out. Let's tour your property. Bad move. Really bad move. And people have said to me, agents, well, John, that's how I bond with people. Well, that's nonsense. Number one is they're busy telling you about their great home. And number two is there's one person in that couple with whom you've had no interaction. None. Zero. And if you walk in there and don't connect with that individual who you haven't had a connection with, you're at a massive disadvantage. Massive. And by the way, guys, Study after study has shown that women are the primary decision makers in which house to buy, and believe it or not, which agent to hire to list the home. And
Yeah.
so you better think like a woman. I actually used to dress up like a woman to go out on listing appointments so I could, no, that was somebody else.
John, one of the way I get around how much that, if you say how much you think your house is worth, oftentimes they'll say, well, we're leaving that to you, right? And then you can't back into it. So I usually say, just so I can start doing my homework, what price are you trying to support?
Yeah, that's a great
gets
question.
that gets into their
That's
head.
a great question. Great question.
You can price it anywhere you want, but I go straight in with, what price are you trying to support, so that I can be prepared for our appointment. What price are you trying to support, so I can start looking
Absolutely.
for data to try and get there.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Will, I learned a trick to get them to tell me the exact number that they're trying to get. I just tell them about 600,000 or 700,000 less than it's worth. And they will suddenly know this mystery number will suddenly show up.
Very quick.
They want to say they want to say it's worth
You'll
$1
get their
million. I
attention.
think it's worth every bit of 400,000, and they will
Right.
right away tell you it's worth $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, John.
So
That's
circling
hilarious.
back, number one is get some info, find out what's behind the curtain before you get there. Number two is you sit down and you connect with the person with whom you had in conversation. Mistake number three is that in an effort to aggrandize oneself, we often go in when we're seeing the property and say, well, you should do this, you should fix that, da, 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 da. And you know what's going to happen? The same thing that happened to Will. Well,
Yep.
we didn't think you liked our house, right? So that's the third mistake. Fourth mistake is when the seller asks you a question about whether or not to do some kind of improvement, and you answer that question, you could bury yourself. Quick story about November, I guess this was, a client of mine went out on a listing appointment, a pro, and this house had a large lot, and the fence that went around the back acre was deplorable. It was falling down, the wood was rotted. The seller turns to my client and said, hey, what do you think I should do about this fence? He answered the question, well, bada bing, bada boom, you put up a new one, the kids, pets, E-I-E-I-O. And so when I was talking to him on the next coaching call, he said, John, I would be shocked if I didn't get this listing. It went so well. And it was like a $1.5 million listing. And I'm thinking to myself, there's the kiss of death right there. I'll be shocked if I didn't get the listing. So he called me 3 days later and said, I can't believe it. I didn't get the listing. And I said, well, why not? Did you ask the seller? And he said, yeah. And he told me that I told him to put up a $30,000 fence, and the other agent told him to just, take it down and throw it in a dumpster, which is what I wanted to do anyway. Right. And so one bad move. What do you think, Jim, I should do with this fence? Well, that's a great question, Hal. What are you thinking? I just want to put it, take it down and throw it in a dumpster. Great idea, right? Game over.
Right.
So you should be careful when that seller asks you a question about improvements. Find out what's behind the flipping curtain. Instead, fools run where an angel fears to follow. So number one, you get information on the phone. Number two, you connect with the person with whom you had spoken. Number three, be real careful about the one mistake Will had, which was telling people do this, do that. Number four is when the seller asks you about an improvement, should I or should I not do this? You find out what the seller is thinking. Guys, any misstep here could cost you money. Anyone could cost you money, and serious money. And the problem is we often go back and do the same damn thing again, right? Without having learned from it. The next mistake that we make is when we sit down and we talk about pricing. Okay. Now, God willing, what about the price that they came up with, they thought it was worth. But I don't discuss that with them on the phone. I asked them very objectively, say, Will, when we were talking on the phone, you felt that your property was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000. And I'm just curious, before I go plowing ahead, would you share with me, how you came up with that number? I'm just curious, right? You have to be careful how you frame it. But you don't say, well, you came up with 500,000. Look, I don't know how to tell you this. You're not even close.
Yeah.
kind of thing. And by the way, while you're sitting with them and talking, you talk to the other person about motivation, because sometimes they're not on the same page. Now, here's the fifth one, and it's very controversial. Most agents, their listing presentation is built around the marketing they do, right? This is what we do to get your home sold. We do this, we do that, we do everything. And they seldom talk about their results and their social proof. And my listing presentation, hang with me, was always built around my results that I gotten for others backed by social proof. And once I presented that, what's a conversation for another day, I would turn and I would say, Bobby, can I just ask you a question? I know you're not ready to make a decision now, but if you had to make a decision, if you and Beverly had to make a decision right now to hire me based solely on my results and solely based on what my clients are saying about me in terms of my 5-star reviews, would you hire me? I didn't even get into marketing before I asked that question. And we don't talk about our results. We don't talk about our company's results. We don't talk about our social proof. And man, that is what people want. They want results, and they want results backed up by substantive data. Hey, Will has 500 million reviews in Ohio. I mean, that's pretty potent stuff. And then when we go into our marketing stuff, and sometimes I would say that, and they would say, John, absolutely, we would hire you. And then I would say, well, listen, we do a lot to get your home on the market and sell it for top dollar. Is there anything you're really concerned about? No. Okay, well, let's do the paperwork. And I went home and watched American Idol, right?
Exactly.
But if we get into our marketing piece, this is another kiss of death. We tell them we do this, we do that, we do EIEIO, and we do not tell them why it's important to them. Right. And I'll give you a great example. So, Will, Mary, I want to share with you something that we do here, and that is that we take outstanding photographs. We have a drone. We really, really are meticulous here in this wheelhouse. Can I share with you why that's important to you? Well, why is that, John? Well, according to the International Association of Realtors, that's the #1 things buyers want when they search homes on the internet. And if we give it to them, it's going to increase the traffic into your property, the number of showings. Number of showings definitely can translate into a higher price point. Does that make sense to you? So we don't tie down, right? We don't tie down the stuff we do to why it's important to them, because sometimes we tell them stuff that's like, so what? You know what I mean? So here's the next mistake. People ask us questions like, well, do you do open houses? Yeah, we do open houses. It's great, blah, blah, blah. Well, look, we didn't want an open house, right? Here we go again. We don't know what's behind the curtain. Well, Will, is it important to you to have an open house? Well, we don't really want to. No sweat. We don't have to do it. Guys, I know this stuff because I made all the mistakes. And we're getting to the end, okay? The next mistake that we make is, not all of us, but we go into a song and dance when it's time to do the paperwork. And if you deal with someone like Will or my wife and you're drawn on and on and on, they're going to stab you in the neck 11 times with a knife. Just get down to it and basically explain what stuff means. We get the paperwork signed, and here's the final deadly mistake. We do not make a preemptive strike against seller's remorse. Bobby, Beverly, thanks so much for your business. I truly appreciate it. And we're going to get busy the next day, tomorrow, marketing your home. But can I share with you a problem that I see a lot of times? Well, what's that? Well, oftentimes people will be talking to a neighbor or somebody they know who bought a property, and they'll say, Bobby, Beverly, are you crazy? You're giving the house away. Right? That price is ridiculous. And then people will call me the next day, and guess what they'll say? We want to raise the price. And I want you to know that this price is spot on. You made a great decision. And so if that happens, just take it with a grain of salt. You guys get the idea, right? And these are the mistakes we make, and the mistakes that will flippin' bury us if we're not careful. And the question that I always ask is, okay, how many listings is it okay to lose because we missed these questions? Now, I'm just going to put a big circle about this, and we'll talk about the big kahuna, and then I'm going to shut up because Will is texting me and says, shut the hell up. But here's the big kahuna, the biggie. We are not abundantly prepared for the commission objection. Our preparations, we hope it doesn't come up. And when it does, we give the sellers a lot of psychobabble about, well, da, 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 and I can't do this marketing and da, 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 and we don't ask questions and we're not prepared for it. And that is the stake through the heart, that one right there. Right there, if I had to tell you, that's the absolute biggest mistake we make, is not understanding how to be prepared for that. Guys, I'm telling you, how do I know these things? From having gotten killed out there. That's how I know. So I'm done. That's what not to do.
And the one thing, and we could spend 2 hours talking about the commission question. And the easiest thing to do for most real estate agents is to just, take the lowest commission or agree to anything. I work in a world of deltas. My dad always calls it delta dollars. He was an engineer. And basically I say, well, listen, cheapest agent in town is going to charge X. Would you agree that's probably the lowest you're going to find? Yeah. Okay. Well, mine's X plus, but let me show you. And John, I've been using our market data, our list to sale price ratio, our average days on market, and our percentage of listings taken versus sold since 2008, when I hired John as my business coach. If you show up with that and you can say, listen, my fee is this, which isn't the most expensive in town. So let's focus on the delta between what I charge and what the cheapest agent in town charges, because then you make your conversation about a much smaller number, because they can't, my dad calls it delta dollars because he says, okay, if I want to buy a stove, the cheapest, crappiest stove I can find is $400. If the one I want to buy is $900, am I willing to pay $500 to get what I want? That's pretty much how he lives his whole life. So I started bringing that into my commission conversations, because I just say, this is the lowest, this is what we charge, but let me show you what that means to you, because I would want to get away with paying the least amount of money too. That's how I do it.
You make a preemptive strike is what you do before it comes up.
I bring up commission, because it's gonna come up. I don't want it to be like the stinky thing under the blanket in the corner, and we know there's something in the corner under that blanket, and sometime in the next half hour, we're gonna have to figure out what the hell it is.
Is that the same as behind the curtain? I'm just curious.
Whatever, yeah. Except when it comes to the commission, you can get killed quicker on that. I had somebody text me earlier. I got 3 properties to sell. If you do them at 5%, I'll do it. I don't know the price. I don't know anything about the property. So I just picked up the phone and I called her. I said, hey, I want to help you. I want to say yes to you, but I really need to see what we're dealing with first, because it's impossible for me to say yeah when I don't even know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you're proving the principle. You're abundantly prepared for that. Abundantly. Your preparation isn't, oh, well, I hope it doesn't come up, right? And if it does, you're backpedaling. I was always abundantly prepared. My MO, my strategy was different than yours, but my principle, be abundantly prepared. Bobby, I'm just curious, when in your marketplace, man, when you got a $20 million property, you've got to be getting beat up on commissions from time to time. And I'm guessing you just toss it to Stacy and say, Stacy decides on the money because she's so
I do. Sometimes I do that. So, real quick, back to that listing presentation and all that, and I'll wrap up with that, the commission idea, but we used to always build these big, and we still build them, these listing presentations, and then one day Coach said to me exactly that. Well, what about the results? And so what I started doing is I started telling people, I'm not really willing to give you my listing presentation because nobody lives here again. So we have to mail this listing presentation to someone in another state, right? And so there's 24 years of trade secrets to someone I don't even know. So I send a 1-page result. We make that results page just top notch on good paper, and 9 out of 10 times that does the trick. There's really nothing else to see. Oftentimes, they'll pretty much go, yeah, I'll go ahead and hire you. And so when it gets into the commission, go back to your results page. This is what it takes to sell your home, and this is what it's going to take to not sell your home. We get hit all the time with these high-end homes, 6, 5, 4, most agents will take them for 5. We'll take them for 5. We'd love to get 6. And and then it will show you on the internet what that's going to look like, a 3 and a 3. And I explain to them what that means. Most of them don't know what that means, how the commission looks, but I'm not interested in 4. I don't have any interest in even taking the listing. And we'll, sometimes we get the 6, sometimes we get the 5. It's just, hard on right now on a $15 million home to get it at 6%. There's too many agents out here that'll take it for less at this point in time. So we're always juggling with that, but pretty much, we never go any lower than that. But I do, my main focus on that was bringing these folks back to what our results are. And if you're a new agent, you just piggyback off of your team.
Exactly. I was
Or
just saying
your
that.
office, right? Or your
What my
office.
team does, and literally like half the time they want you to send over this listing book. I won't tell you the true story, what Coach told me about listing books, because it's not PG, but got a PG-13. But I always use the story about listing books, and the results page is pretty much wraps it up though.
Yeah, so it's really interesting here because I have clients and you guys who are on the call, like you're all pros, but I had a client call me. This was last year, right? I remember exactly where I was when she called me and said, "I'm gonna take a screenshot and send you a text." And she's negotiating her commission via text, right? Text, and she said, What do you think? And I said, I'm trying to decide whether or not it's the death penalty or life imprisonment with no chance of parole. If you guys, then Will, you made a great move there. What you said, if you guys try to negotiate your commission via text or email, I say this with a servant's heart, you're going to get exactly what you deserve.
That's like smoking crack cocaine. I mean, there's just no light in that tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a scary thought. So,
that's
Floyd Wickman moved. The Sweat Hogs, for those guys who remember. I think Armand's the only guy old enough to remember Sweat Hogs, right? But Floyd Wickman's move was people asked about the commission. He had to see in the house. He did exactly what Will did. Hey, look, I have no idea what the commission is. I haven't even seen your house yet. When can we get together?
But
Right.
nowadays, but what you have to add to that now, though, is I don't want to evade your question because I know it's really important to you. I want to list it for whatever it is that you're saying, but I really need more information before I can give you anything that we can rely on. So that you're saying I want to help you, I want to work with you, and it leaves yourself open, but then you need more data.
I never tried to give any information without at least getting into the home.
Yeah.
Not over online, none of that stuff. I like to
Uh-huh.
see the home. And I also never give a specific price when I do a listing either. It's always a range.
That's what I do. I let them pin it down. And I talk about
So when I tell
thresholds.
them the range is going to be the low side is going to sell right away, and the other side is going to piss you off. So no, the low side is going to piss you off, and the high side is what you're going to want. But that's not, neither one of those is going to happen. Somewhere there in the middle is where we need to be.
Yeah. And then the one thing, I'm getting a little bit more specific, but it might help some agents. Talk about thresholds. If it's going to be in the $250,000, $275,000, $300,000 price range, you want to talk about keeping it under 300 so that you can generate more activity. So I try to talk about, ranges, pull down menus on websites, because that's what they're thinking about. You want to keep it in certain, like we're not dealing with some people on this call might be, but I'm not dealing with, $10 million properties. I'm dealing with $200,000 to $600,000 properties. So I usually talk about thresholds because it makes them understand the importance of staying beneath a certain threshold, but it also makes them understand that it takes the pressure off of me to pick a price. So I try to get them within a certain threshold.
And again, guys, we're talking about principle, right? You have to absorb the principle and then choose a
Formulate,
strategy
yeah.
that works well for you, right? Will's
Exactly.
strategy, my strategy, Bobby's strategy, they're all different. Now, mine's always the best because I'm the coach and I know everything. But
Exactly.
if it's effective for those guys.
But seriously, the big takeaway from all of this is on the listing side is ask more questions about them and their needs, and stop talking about yourself. Stop doing the monkey dance, talking about how great you are and how long you've been in the business and all of that, because all that's going to do is blow up in your face. Nobody wants an egomaniac. Listen, listen, listen. Just ask them questions and listen to their answers. And because think about yourself. Nobody wants to know it all. When you're talking to somebody and they start just flapping their gums at you, you just want to jump off a bridge. I mean, that's not going to get you a listing. Trust me, I've tried it and it doesn't usually work.
And to piggyback on that, Will, one misstep when it comes to principle, one violation of principle could cost you thousands of bucks.
Or whatever the commission is on that house.
Yeah, exactly. So how many of them is it okay to lose because you haven't mastered the principle? Look, strategy's easy, right? Principle is the tough thing to absorb.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're no better than your next sale. I remember we'll close on this. Doesn't seem like anyone's got any questions, but I remember 2015, I had the best year I'd ever had. And going into 16, I lost like 6 listings in a row. And I remember calling John. It's because I put myself in this position where I thought I should win every listing. That is a very dangerous place. That's almost as dangerous as assuming your wife or husband or whatever will always be there and you don't have to do anything to work on it. And I came into 2016 and I was getting criticized about my tone of voice by talking too much. And I didn't understand. It took me a while to realize you're no better than when you were before that. So you have to go back to what got you there, because if you start acting like this guy who's there now or girl, that's not going to work either. So it's about listening to list. If you talk too much, you're going to walk too much. No questions at all from anybody. Hopefully you guys got some good information out of this.
Thank you, Will and Coach.
Will and
Thank you,
Bobby,
guys. Thank you, Bobby.
this was excellent, guys. I'm Jennifer in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina market, and I have to say this is right on point with, we just invested in some lead gen stuff, which I've never done, and I did it mainly for my team. I got a good repeat and referral, but I knew that they don't, some of them, and so I needed to invest in something. So the questions you ask when you get those leads, that's the moment of decision right there, right? So the questions you asked in the beginning, I love, well, what interested you about this house? Perfect. I love that. I love the reminder, John, about asking questions at listings, even before you go to the listing, because I'm guilty of talking to them and they're going, oh, I forgot to ask him that after we hang up. And then I had to do some research on the house and hope that our numbers are somewhat jiving. So you're giving me some more confidence on how to present that from the moment they call me about a listing, because we all love those calls, right? They're a gem of a call. But I think getting and having those questions up front and being prepared for that call, text, whatever it is, just sets you up for success. So thank you guys for the time. This was right on. I appreciate it. Thanks, John, for coordinating.
Thank you. Marshall, did you have something? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
No, I wasn't raising my hand for that, but I did have a good takeaway from you guys. With the listing, asking them if they have any other decision makers. That's a really good question to ask. I don't necessarily do that for my listings, but for my buyers, I didn't had a lot of failures with buyers that way. I pretty much do that every time now with my buyers, but as far as my listings, I'm going to incorporate that into my my business as well. So look forward to doing that and seeing some results from it.
We can't squander these listing opportunities anymore. There's too few of them. We got to be dialed in and spend time on it and prepare ahead of time and do our homework and try to, do the very best we can. I mean, that's very, very important. Slow it down. Our market
Yeah.
right now, someone told me the other day, we're a snail on the wing of a 747. So we got a slow market that's just moving so fast because houses are selling so quickly. People are making these quick emotional decisions, which nobody likes to do. And all it does is stress them out. We have more buyer and seller remorse than ever before because of these quick, emotional, huge financial decisions. We were never taught as kids to do that. And now we're forced to do it. And we have to understand that when we're dealing with these people and try to slow the process down. And if you can don't send listing agreements via dot loop, try to do these things face to face if you
Oh,
can.
always.
Because I lost 2 listings last year because he was listing the house with me. Everything was good. I was rocking and rolling. I sent him the listing document and he didn't like something that was written in it. And he never even asked me a question. He never sent me back and I could never reach him again. Just because I got lazy. So
There's something to be said, for face-to-face, technology is great, but it doesn't enable us to listen to tonality, read body language, facial expressions. Man, we can lose a lot. And Will, I love that you said that because doing this thing face-to-face, I don't believe is optional. I just don't. Now, Bobby, you're in a different situation, but you can use Zoom.
right, but if we're just trying to think about the amount of money you're going to make on a listing, in the past we didn't have to focus so much on it, but we can't afford to squander it. And if you have to go meet with them twice, meet with them twice. If you sit down with them and get them to sign a listing agreement and then send them disclosures, have them sign an expense sheet and a listing agreement face to face, and then send them disclosures via dot loop. Don't lose listings by making silly, quick decisions, trying to save time, because it's not, if you're losing $3,000, $4,000, $6,000, $10,000, this is not the market to do that in. If the market's already down 30% and we're losing another 20 because we're being lazy, probably not smart. All right. You guys have a great day. Thank you very much. And we'll have another class next month and we'll let you know about it.